started. So I saw, was there somebody who was new to the space for the first time? Or this gathering particularly, I know who's new, but anyone new completely? Well, regardless, a quick reminder that you'll hear the name Thich Nhat Hanh, Plum Village, if you're unfamiliar with that. That is, Plum Village is a tradition of meditation and mindfulness and interfaith Buddhism that is started by Thich Nhat Hanh, and Taoist meditation center's core gatherings are inspired by Plum Village tradition. And please know that I'd like to also make a disclaimer that my talks, I want it to be taken not as a Dharma teacher's talk, but rather something for you to consider and see what kind of thoughts bubble up for you. And that is to honor the tradition, the founding members of Taoist Meditation Center, including Brother Jiyoon, started to make space for all faith, non-faith, all varied opinions within the community. And I like to say it out loud that you may or may not agree with my talk, and that is part of the beauty of this space. So thank you for being here. And for those of you who are not familiar with me, I'm a relative newbie of serving the Meditation Center as the center director. Yeah, and for those of you who may not have heard of my talks much, I like being very transparent, like where's my talks coming from, what are my intentions for the talks, why am I talking about this, why now? And so to hear some of my open-hearted share, witnessing the violence, hatred, confusion, and more in this world, and feeling heartbroken, often lost and uncertain, speechless. So here's a koan for you, for those of you. How do you give a talk about mindfulness when you have no words? When you feel speechless? When you don't know what to talk about? So that's a fake koan, it's not a real koan. So unlike real koan, I do actually have an answer to my fake koan. How do you talk about mindfulness when you feel speechless? That's when I get into a conversation. Let's hear what other people have to say. Let's hear what resonates when I encounter other people's thoughts, feelings, and what doesn't resonate. Encountering others, being in conversation, is what snaps me out of paralysis, speechlessness. And because if I'm just alone, I get trapped in the maze of my brain that I'm often prone to do. And so a phone call with a friend, or long, good conversation with my partner, those are great. But tonight, the conversation that I'm bringing into this space is a conversation that I have with written words of kindred spirit, someone I consider to be ally, currently alive or passed on. Yeah. So in that spirit, I'll be reading out of the book, How to Stay Human in a Fucked Up World by Kim Desmond, and share some of my short reflections. And I will open the floor for small group discussion so that we can kind of see what came up for you and check in with one another. And my hope is this. I hope a good conversation that you surely have if you choose to engage in small group conversation, always optional. If you have a conversation, my feeling is that it's going to be a good one. And I hope that will be a soothing balm to your soul tonight. One more thing before I start the talk. I tend to have a long intro to my talks. In celebration of upcoming Martin Luther King Jr.'s Day, Monday, 19th, I wanted to share some MLK's words that resonated with me And also, I feel like I'm in conversation with some of these words as I'm processing, writing this talk, and so on. So here are some of his words. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. One more. Faith is taking the first step, even when you can't see the whole staircase. So this is my crawling, this is my taking step in the immensity, witnessing immensity of all. So as Michael read, the talk title that I gave is Reflections on How to Stay Human in a Fucked Up World. I love this book, and maybe I also wanted to have some expletives as I witness everything that is going on in this world. But to introduce this book, why am I bringing this book into this space? This is a wonderful book written by a student of Thich Nhat Hanh, and this is a really succinct review from Tricycle magazine that captures the spirit of it. The reviewer at the Tricycle magazine writes, "It's possible to pay attention and care about the suffering in the world without letting it poison us. This statement is at the heart of the new book by Tim Desmond, a mindfulness teacher, psychotherapist, and a longtime student of Thich Nhat Hanh. How to Stay Human in a Fucked Up World shows us that by relating to life's ever-present pain with compassion, joy, equanimity, wisdom, we have fighting chance to experience happiness." Desmond invites us to take our mindfulness practice off the cushion and into the world, which never has been and never will be perfect. And just wanted to show his face. This is the writer of the book that I'm about to read passages. The invitation is see what resonates with you, what memories it may pull up, or what doesn't resonate with you. Just see what comes up for you. Chapter 1, Something Deeper Than Despair. I would not have you descend into your own dream. I would have you be a conscious citizen of this terrible and beautiful world. Ta-Nehisi Coates. On November 14th, 2016, just 6 days after the election, my wife Annie woke up in the middle of the night in excruciating pain. A trip to the ER revealed that the cancer she's been fighting for more than a year had spread into her abdomen, and a tumor was blocking her left kidney. Several long hours later, she emerged from surgery with a plastic tube implanted in her side that drained urine into the bag. I was told that she would likely have this tube for the rest of her life. When our 3-year-old visited, I had to teach him not to touch his mom's tube. That was a moment I could hear despair calling me, almost audibly. The despair said, "Your life is shit. Everything is completely fucked. Your best option is to go cower in the corner." In that intense moment, I thought of a story I'd heard the Vietnamese Buddhist monk and peace activist Thich Nhat Hanh tell countless times over the 20 years I've studied with him. It's the story about a banana tree, and it goes like this. One day, Thich Nhat Hanh was meditating in the jungle in Vietnam. and he saw a young banana tree with just 3 leaves. The first leaf was fully grown, broad, flat, dark green. The second leaf was still partially curled beneath the first. And the third leaf was very light green and tender, just beginning to unfurl. Reminder, this was during the middle of Vietnam War, and Thich Nhat Hanh was leading a huge organization of young people who would help rebuild villages that had been destroyed by bombs, napalm. He spent nearly every day with villagers whose lives had been ravaged by war, and he witnessed the deaths of several of his closest friends. The central question in Thich Nhat Hanh's life at the time was how to reconcile the intensity of his calling to help suffering people with his mindfulness practice. He knew that he needed his mindfulness practice to keep from being overwhelmed with despair. But how could he justify cultivating peace and joy in himself while so many people are dying? He was holding the question in his mind and looking at the young banana tree. He had a deep insight. It occurred to him that the eldest banana leaf was fully enjoying her life as a leaf. She was absorbing the sun and the rain, radiating beauty, peacefulness. However, in her peacefulness, she hadn't abandoned other leaves to pursue her own happiness. In fact, as she nourished herself, basking in the sunshine, she was also nourishing the young leaves, the banana tree, and the entire jungle. Thich Nhat Hanh decided that human beings are just like this. As we nourish ourselves with peacefulness and joy, we are also supporting the well-being of every other person in our lives. So in that hospital room, as I looked at my wife and my son, I couldn't avoid seeing how much they needed me. They didn't need me to do anything in particular. They needed me to stay with them and help them see that they weren't alone, that the life was still worth living. So I will leave it as that and kind of skip to my reflections that came up for me. The reason I wanted to share this passage is that I found it really refreshing and I really appreciated that he, using expletives and description, shows this kind of despair that throughout our human life, that we are bound to experience some chapters of our life, this pitch dark despair. As a mindfulness practitioner, sometimes in the past, I've struggled to speak into this deepest sense of despair, confusion publicly, because I felt like if I'm an advanced practitioner, I have to be grateful, process all of this somehow, and rise above it. But here, as you say, how to stay human is in the title. It's not how to be enlightened and be above it all. So in that I really appreciated his writing in this visceral sense of sorrow, despair, confusion he was experiencing. And this kind of normalization of the depth of despair is really necessary in this day and age, especially because it's often stigmatized to be shared in the public sphere. And I chose because I thought this might be the time share narratives, writing art that normalizes the depth of sorrow and despair we may feel at some point in our lives, so that we don't numb it out. When sometimes, especially during like child development, when certain emotions aren't shown, sometimes people have hard time identifying it in themselves. Like sometimes others' expression helps you to identify and connect with what's within you. So it felt important to me as someone who's going through confusion myself to share this passage. Yeah, this mindfulness teacher, student Tina Han, is going through this really challenging depth of darkness. And I also appreciated how in that relatively short passage, this entire book is wonderful, by the way. But even in this like beginning of this chapter, he reminded us the power of joy through Thich Nhat Hanh's banana leaf story. That each and every moment is very complex. Yes, there's sorrow. Yes, there's confusion. Yes, Thich Nhat Hanh was meditating as Vietnam War was unfolding. But there's also beauty of the banana leaves. And the reminder that joy is part of the equation of resilience. In other part of the book, he gets deeper into practices with joy. And this is a recurring theme in Plum Village tradition, Dharma speaker, that joy and compassion is not two opposing forces, that you can be having your heart to all the suffering in the world. But to do that, actually, we have to be tapping into the availability of joy and beauty, to be spacious, to hold the compassion with the joy. They're all part of the equation. So that's what really moved me, and I wanted to bring into this space as part of the conversation. Because in somatic experiencing, which is the modality that I'm trained in, we talk about not letting ourselves, we talk about how healthy nervous system is an agile nervous system that can go to all the different places and feel the full range of emotions, full range of being, sometimes doing, sometimes being, and that stretching of the range is part of the resilience. And boy, the highs and lows of these times for me, and saying so nods, can be so wide. And I thought this passage captured how wide human experience can go, fluctuate. Can we dance with it? Is the question that I wanted to ask for all of us through this passage. So to put it succinctly, with this share of this passage, I wanted to make space for two yeses. Yes, what we are feeling is big, and also yes, we are resilient enough to be with it. I hope you can feel those two yeses within you. Alright, so that's my talk and share. And at Dallas Meditation Center, we believe that connecting with one another, really, that's where the well of wisdom is. People sitting next to you, even if you didn't get to have a chance to chat. In exchange of views, we discover something in ourselves, something from the world. So in that spirit, I will be inviting all of us to break into a group of 3 to 5, if you will. If you don't want to engage in conversation tonight, feel free to make yourself tea and just enjoy the silence also. You can stay in the room, of course. And here are some perhaps useful reminders. We aim to let everyone finish their sentences. In eagerness, it's very common for us to jump in the middle of somebody's sentence in our space outside of the meditation center. So here we believe that hearing people out thoroughly is a mindfulness practice also. And another thing that we encourage in this sharing space is deep listening, noticing what goes through our mind, body, and spirit as we're listening to another person, as we're giving generous attention. And we make space for one another, meaning, not everybody wants to speak. Some people want to listen more. But if you're kind of getting the feeling of, oh, this person didn't get to chat much, speak much, and the time is coming to an end, encouraging one other person to jump in, that can be another way of having a mindful conversation. So those are some reminders. And sometimes we need it, sometimes we don't. These are only optional conversational prompts. Just what came up for you listening to my talk, Tim's reading, which sentence, quote stayed with you, what came up for you when you heard MLK's quote, just generally, what does this make you think of? How are you? Where are you at? Those are some of the possibilities, but let your heart speak organically. And we'll talk for until 6:45 and 6:40, 6:45, depending on the energy of the room. And then we'll come back to that big circle to close out. And so now feel free to start looking around, make some eye contacts, shift to your seats